Apparently we're
When?
vibe coding and vibe organizing this conference is what I'm hearing.
That's how you do it, man.
Oh, thought that was a bad enough joke to get more of a laugh, but I appreciate it. I appreciate the sympathy laughs. Okay, so thank you for everybody coming out to Global Azure. So this is the second year in a row that we have done it. We are planning on trying to keep it going forward, just having a free mini conference half day for people to come and learn about what may be the best hyperscaler. Debatably, nobody will agree with me when I say that, but it could be, you know. So big thank you to Improving for hosting this. Improving, they are planning on hiring 25 developers this year. So if you haven't reached out, send in a resume. It's a consulting company, so the pipeline is a little slow, but they are actively hiring. You just might wait a little bit on it. And they host a bunch of other things in Columbus. I know Kyle, I think, just won the Tech Community Columbus award for being the most involved person in Columbus kind of thing. They are great, cannot say enough great things about them. They are providing the pizza. There is free pizza, free snacks, free beverages. Help yourself. And then we're going to kick this off in a sec. So we have 4 speakers, and there'll be about 50 minutes-ish, 10-minute break between them, but not too many speakers, to be a little bit flexible on time, depending on how Q&A goes. Our first speaker just jumped out of the room, but I will introduce him. So Mark is better known as the Azure Terraformer. He has a YouTube channel. He has a bunch of social media. He has pins and 3D printed figurines,
Tacos.
all the things that you need to write good software.
Yeah.
No comment. And yeah, no, he is a HashiCorp ambassador.
Yeah, I'm a HashiCorp ambassador.
But today he's not talking about ISC because apparently that's boring now. Now everything's about AI and vibes. So I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks. You just set it down there. Okay, yeah, hey everybody. So my talk, this is a little different than, I usually spend a lot of time talking about infrastructure as code, infrastructure lifecycle management, and kind of the boundary between application workloads and infrastructure. But I'm like an OG .NET developer at heart, okay? I did Java, VB6, COM+, okay? I'm dating myself a little bit. And as soon as C# came out, you know, I was on that, like, you know, white on rice or bees on honey, whatever. And I've been doing .NET ever since. But I've been, throughout my career, like I kind of moved into, okay, we have a lot more to do than just coding, right? We have to provision our infrastructure now. We have to deploy our application. We have to do all this stuff end to end. And so I spent less and less time just doing the programming, which I still do. And I spent more and more of my time helping my teams like facilitate that process. So that's kind of where I got focused in. But what you know, got me interested in Aspire is been talking with a colleague of mine, David Fowler, who this is his thing. Like David loves this thing. And so I'm like, okay, I got to look at this. I got to give it a shot. Dust off the old, you know, C#, you know, memory banks and give it a go. But how many of you guys have heard of .NET Aspire? Okay, a couple. Well, that's good because I have a slide that talks about it. But whoa, I hope the button doesn't do that every time. But .NET Aspire is a framework that lets you build applications very rapidly. And it's a highly opinionated .NET solution with a bunch of patterns that are coupled with infrastructure and application modeling capabilities, which basically means you tell it, you know, essentially in C# what you want your application to be structured like, and what infrastructure services, what services on Azure you want it to use, and it will make it so, right? So I'm like, what a perfect opportunity to vibe code, right? And so I ventured down this journey of figuring out how Aspire works and what it is, to see how this new thing works. And what Aspire gives you is when you load up a template, I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but out of the box, it gives you a front end and a back end. So front end being a web application, a back end being like a REST API, right? You can make it whatever you want. But where the bread and butter comes in for Aspire, you know, you might be thinking, well, that's kind of a normal .NET solution setup. Like that's nothing new here. But where it is new is like with this concept of an app host. And this app host is where it all comes together. It's like the crossroads of your solution. It's where the infrastructure and the application meet, right? And that interface is there. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But it also builds in this dashboard such that when you deploy your application, it has essentially like a dashboard where you can go see the health of your application, see the different services that are deployed, and it hooks in all of the telemetry and health, so you can go, track like the REST API calls that are being made and look at diagnostics and things like that. It's pretty much an end-to-end thing, which is really cool. So I was like, okay, if I'm gonna go try this thing out for the very first time, I need to have some domain, right? I need to have something to go build. When I first started writing software, this was back when I was a wee little tot, but at the time, people like were doing MP3s for the very first time. So like the very first software applications or code that I wrote was basically like Java command line tools that helped me organize my MP3 library. But I've always found it easier to learn something if I have like some problem that I want to solve, even if that problem is relatively trivial or kind of, I don't know, it's not like serious, like, oh my gosh, like enterprise, blah, 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 right? So what I landed on was pickleball. Who in here knows what pickleball is? Well, a lot more hands. That's great. So yeah, my wife and my son, we discovered pickleball. I don't know, like I think down in Florida, like we were staying someplace and they had a pickleball court, and like let's go try that. And then we come back here in Columbus and we found out, oh my gosh, there's like these little facilities that people go to and play pickleball all the time. It's like a thing. And so now we're members at Pickle and Chill, and we go there for like sip and serve and stuff like that. And I get my butt kicked. My son is really good, but it's a lot of fun. It's good family activity. Get your heart rate up, it's exercise. Anyway, so I was like, pickleball, why not? Let's do this. So what's my plan? I want to build a pickleball app with .NET Aspire. And my pickleball app is going to help pickleball players connect and get on courts and play and have a good time playing pickleball, right? So I have like a domain, like a problem that I want to solve, even if it's a little bit lighthearted, right? And so now I'm going to venture off and I'm going to do things that I haven't done in years. First of all, I've never done Aspire. Okay, Aspire is relatively new. But I've done a lot of C#. I've done a lot of development. I built a lot of systems, but I'm doing things that are new for me too, right? And so I have not built a web app in, I can't count how many years, okay? Like I usually, I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I'm backend, right? Or maybe native mobile app, right? If like we're talking Maui or something like that. But so I'm gonna be doing a web app for the very first time. So you guys are gonna have to give me some constructive criticism about that. What's up?
I just want to say your live stream's mirrored. So anyone watching won't see the
What's that?
Oh, he's saying it's flipped. The video is mirrored.
It may not matter.
Oh, I don't know. We might have to figure it out. Yeah, they'll have to hold up a mirror and look at it or something. Oh boy, yeah. I apologize. Dyslexia people. I'm here for you. Anyways, so pickleball and Aspire. So I start up a vanilla Aspire project. Never touched one before. And I look in this app host because this thing's like the new thing. So I'm like, okay, what the heck is going on in here? And in here, in app host, this is that C# code that like sets up your service. I'm like, okay, I'm creating a distributed application. We've got this builder thing that's pretty common with .NET, so I'm kind of familiar with that. And this thing is doing stuff with the builder that I've never seen it do. It's adding a project, and one of the projects is a project in my solution called API service, and it's got external endpoints, don't know what that means, and then it has a web app. And I'm like, okay, so I've got an API and a web app. This makes sense to me. This C# basically is structuring it so that when I go publish this thing, it's going to deploy Azure resources that are all stitched up that basically have my web API talking, or my web app talking to my web API. You can see there's a reference to my API service down here in my web app. And so basically, when you have project dependencies, right, different components of your architecture that need to talk to each other, you just model it in C#. You're just like, oh, I've got this service, and I've got this client, and this client needs to talk to this service. There you go. Aspire figures it out for you. So it's like, okay, this is, very new, but I'm kind of getting, I'm with the program. I keep hitting the wrong button. So then I'm like, okay, well, all I have is like these web servers hosting stuff. I need to have a database, okay? And I'm cheap. And this app is going to be for consumers playing pickleball. So I can't go spin up like a highly available Oracle, server like that, or something crazy expensive. So I want to use Azure Table Storage, right? I don't even want to do Cosmos DB, even though I love that service, but it's a little bit pricey for what my use case I'm trying to do. I'm trying to keep it really cheap. So I'm doing table storage. And so with that, all I have to do is in my app host, I set up and add Azure Storage if I'm in publishing. So if is in publish mode, then .NET Aspire is going to go provision an Azure Table Storage account, and it's going to pipe in with this reference here, the connection string to my API service. And nothing changes with my web app because you know what? My web app doesn't have to go talk to the table storage directly. My web app talks to the API API talks to table storage. Making sense? Made sense to me. So I'm like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Now locally, when I'm not published on Azure, I want to run locally. And I don't want to have a very complex environment, so I can just use the Azure storage simulator on my local machine. And when I'm running locally, I can test my app and I can test out the features, play around with it. And it's all storing to my local machine. So I don't even need anything in Azure yet, right? Only when I publish do I need that stuff in Azure. So this is going great. And yeah, I highlighted those things, sorry. So yeah, this is the builder to set up the Azure Table Storage. And this is the reference that I make to the thing. And so this is what my solution looks like. And so I start with the functionality that I want to build. I got players, I got courts, I got facilities like pickle and chill, right? And I'm standing out table entities that are essentially going to store to Azure Table Storage. So I know how Azure Table Storage works. I've done it before. So like we're not at the boundaries of my proficiency yet, right? So I'm stubbing this stuff out and I'm defining a pattern. And that's when I'm like, okay, I'm going to use AI and I'm going to have AI help me with this mission, because there's going to be stuff that I don't know how to do. So, but like I started with a pattern, like I've got a player, I've got a court. This is roughly what a player is. This is roughly what a court is. This is roughly what a facility is. This data entity is going to be stored in table storage. I'm going to use a service class to like go save that to table storage. That's a very primitive structure that I start off with. But then in order to do that, I give an example, and I'm actually sharing with you actual prompt history from me like doing this vibe coding, okay? And I say, help me implement CRUD operations for the entity tenant into a table. That's it. That's all I say. And then I give it, what I want the structure to look like. And it fills in the gaps in my code for me. All I have to do is give it very basic information, pointers, and a little bit of framing, and it goes nuts, right? And so this plugs in a bunch of table service client operations that go talk to Azure Table Storage, right? And that app host configuration is already set up to allow me to run table storage locally, so I'm all good. And so that's my initial prompt. And I give it some of my domain models. I'm like, here's what I think a player should look like. I got first name, last name, date of birth. I mean, it's not hard to imagine what these things might look like, right? If this is a problem that's close to you. So now I'm going to course correct. I'm like, okay, I'm pumping out like courts, players, facilities, tenants, like all these things I'm pumping out. to pump the brakes because like I got to set myself up for success in the future. Like if I really want to go nuts with this thing, this whole Pickleball app. So that's when I'm like, okay, my initial primitive design, like I was going directly to the to the database. I need to inject some data access components. So I want to refactor the code that I've already written. Most of this code, the AI has assisted me in writing anyway. And so that's when, like with this new idea, I'm like, okay, so now I want to do interfaces so that I can inject concrete implementations. What happens if table storage doesn't work out for me? I need to swap out and use Cosmos DB. So I'm starting to lay the foundation for that. And it helps me accelerate my refactoring. And so I prompt it like this, and help me modify this class. I want to receive some method parameters, and I'm kind of like giving it the context, and then I just copy pasta code that I already have, and it takes it with me. And then I say, as I do this, I'm giving it feedback, and I'm making tweaks. So I'm like, no, I don't like how you did the partition key there. I want you to change the partition key. What's up?
Where are you doing this? Like, what actually are you using? Are you using like Copilot? Are you using
I'm doing this in ChatGPT, and I'm like side by side ChatGPT, and I'm talking to ChatGPT basically like it's my dev team, right? I'm like, I don't like that, let's tweak this, let's move this. Okay, now you did that, that's great, like, and I'm kind of moving it around, yeah. And then I say, okay, like by the way, like what you gave me isn't quite what I expected. This is a classic senior developer, junior developer conversation. I asked you to go do this, but you came back with me and you bypassed the whole architectural pattern that I defined, and you're talking directly to the database. So I'm like, no. What I actually wanted you to do is I wanted you to use the repository, and the repository should encapsulate the direct database access, and then the business logic is going to be in the service. So I course correct here when it gives me back stuff that I don't like. And so then, this is the stuff that I didn't like. I didn't like that you directly use the table client in here. And here you go, creating containers and stuff like within that class. So then I just rinse and repeat. I can just blow this out like across my domain, courts, facilities, events, whatever, right? And all I have to do is say, okay, now do this for this entity. Now do this for that entity, right? And I'm like, and then I get to a point where like, I have so much contextual history in ChatGPT, I don't even have to give it copy pasta code. I'm like, you know what? I have an idea for a new piece of functionality. Let's go build this whole stack of components for this domain model, right? And it goes, this is the prompt where it's like, I don't even have to give it all the details, and it just like figures it out based on the historical context. And so now I'm like, okay, I'm able to develop these functions and the data access so fast, right? I don't want to forget about unit testing. So I already have the interfaces set up. I can just be like, all right, let's go write some unit tests. So then I say, write a unit test for this repository using X unit. So I'm giving it context, and then I'm giving it framing, like this is what I want you to go write for. And I'm telling it, by the way, I want you to use the local storage emulator. I don't want you to go talk to Azure, right? So set up the unit tests in a certain way. And then, yeah. And then this is my favorite prompt. Once you get vibe coding, like AI assisted coding with the AI, and it has like the context of all the stuff that you've done, you can just use this phrase, now this. It knows exactly what you're talking about within the context. And I'm like, okay, now we're going to do a unit test for the facility service, right? It already knows what the facility service is. I give it some code, plunk it in, it pops out a unit test. Then I move on to integration tests, where integration tests, okay, now we're not using the Azure Storage Simulator anymore. I want this to be end-to-end. Like we're not looking at a single component. Let's look at the interfaces where we come into the application. And I want you to do this, right? All in a sequence, right? And so here, like now create an integration test, writes to table storage, use the simulator connection string, generate a new ID, and generate some seed data. This is where it gets really exciting. right? Just by telling it to do seed data, it introduced a new library that I've never used, actually. It's called Bogus. Who's a .NET developer who's used Bogus before? I didn't know about it either. But apparently it generates fake data for you in a really interesting way using generic types. So I was like, all right, this is awesome. So I tweaked this and I said, okay, now check for how many players are left. So I'm adjusting the logic of this integration test, right? Because within an integration test, you're testing those fine-grained, like, what is the status after this operation has taken place? Because within that, when you run that operation, a whole bunch of stuff is going to happen in an integration test. So you're doing stateful checks at key places within the logic. And then I notice I only want to fill up matches completely with 4 players. If 4 players are not available, we won't put those players onto a court, right? This is basic pickleball stuff, right? So I'm having these conversations with it, and I just keep expanding, right? Let's take, I like what you did, let's take this and put it into multiple scenarios, right? So literally, these are conversations that I've had countless times with my development teams, right? Once they bring me something, I look at it, I assess it, right? I see if there's misalignment in terms of understanding, like what I'm asking for, and then I direct them to go expand, right? So I feel like as I'm doing this, like I have a team of like 6 to 8 developers that are working for me, and in a span of minutes, right? As opposed to historically, like I'd have to, I'd clock out at 5 o'clock, they'd work, over the night, then I come back at my 8 a.m. stand up and like, hello, like what did we do yesterday, right? So, and expand some more. Now this is an interesting one. So I want to make sure that this is idempotent, right? I want to be able to run this scenario over and over again, and I don't want the test to leave crap in the database after I'm done, right? Because it has to be able to run over and over again. When you write integration tests, you're touching the actual databases, so you want to do that to make sure that the test can run predictably every single time. So now I'm okay. I've got all the business logic working. I've got unit tests. I've got integration tests. Let's go add some REST APIs. So here, so I'm like, can you create an API for me? And now the API for court session. I have, this is like, if you read this is like an actual detailed conversation I'm having with the AI about nuanced implementation details of the service and the logic that's implemented there, right? Let's add mappings for the court session, and by the way, we probably don't need an independent API for court session. We can just use the existing court API, right? And then this is also good busy work. Blow out all the open API spec, right? So I don't have to do all those annotations by hand, right? You forgot that, right? Remember, we're going to be generating Swagger, so we got to go put that in there. Am I hitting the right button? Yeah. So add seed generation. I talked about this a little bit earlier, and I stumbled across this. I was never going to do seed generation, but I was like, aha, this is a great idea. Like, why not do seed generation? If I can get AI to generate seed data for me and tweak the logic for seed generate, I could like do all kinds of like crazy testing and enhance and do built-in quality. Like stuff that I probably would not have prioritized like previously, because it's like, well, we got other stuff to do, right? So like we're not going to spend time working on some complex seed generation thing, because you know what, business wants these features. Like I'm cranking out the features. The business like doesn't even like the business. That's me, right? I don't have any more features. Like I'm just adding built-in quality, and I'm like building testing around it, right? Which these testing apparatuses are so sophisticated, I would have never prioritized them previously. It's incredible. Because why not? Now you can write some code and it'll generate some seed data. I want you to create a tenant like this. I want you to have 8 courts. I want you to name them like that. I want to have 32 players, with ages between 18 and 60 years old. That kind of stuff that I can give to generate the seed data. Now I got a bunch of seed data. I can load up and demo my app, right? in production. So with .NET Aspire, publish, poof, my app's out there. Now it's just a REST API hosted on an Azure container instance with an Azure Table Storage backing behind it, but I can pull it up in Bruno or Postman, and I can hit that API. I move along. I think I hit the wrong button again. So yeah, we're more seed data. So now I'm at the point where I've got this API built. I'm going to use the Open API generator to produce a client. Because get ready, you know, we're going to teach this old dog some new tricks. I haven't built a web app since Web 2.0. Who even knows what Web 2.0 is anymore? Okay, I don't even know what version we're on now. Like Web 6.0 or something. I don't know. So like, yeah, I build a lot. I'm backend. Okay, so I'm like, okay, let's build a web app. I'm using Razor Pages. Last I touched a web front end, it was ASP.NET MVC. What the heck's a Razor page? I don't know. Web forms, who's heard of that? Okay, yeah, those are my old stomping grounds. So these Razor pages is like totally like different for me. I don't even know how to structure the project. So we're squarely in vibe coding now, right? Previously, me blowing out the back end, that's just me doing what I do. And I'm just like a well-oiled machine. I've got a, 10 person team, and they're taking my instruction. They're like fixing up the logic and doing all this busy work for me. And I'm like, yeah, go nuts. But now I'm at the edge of my proficiency. I don't know what a Razor page is. You could tell me, I'm like, oh, like Razor the phone, you flip it, I'm dating myself again. Anyways, I'm trying to work on a set of pages. I want a bunch of pages to manage my tenants, my facilities, courts, and events. I should be able to select a tenant that I'm working on. So I'm trying to structure, I know how to build UIs, but I don't know how to build Razor pages. So I'm trying to tell it, this is how I want my UI to be structured. Master details. Master details. Who knows what a master details page is? You do. Okay. All right, I'm not the only one. All right, so we're building web apps. And I get to a point where like I built this page. Did I? Did I build this page?
What's the name of it?
Yeah.
I built this.
Yeah, you didn't build that. Great. Now I'd like to show a couple of pages. So sometimes I have to be specific about how I want the UI to look, right? And I've managed multidisciplinary teams where I've got creative designers, I've got UX people, I've got UX architects, right? I'm like, this is, let's do this. So like sometimes you got to be specific. So I'm like, great, as we run this event, I want to, we have a bunch of players that have registered. I want to see who hasn't showed up, who has showed up. Why don't you put it in little bubbles and, like let's show the count. So as this event rolls on and people trickle in, like the count changes, right? So this is what it gives me, right? But I had to be specific about it, right? But sometimes you don't have to be specific. Like literally when I first was prototyping, I was like, this page doesn't look very good. Make it look better. Like, what the hell, bro? And literally it was like a Battleship Gray web page. And if anybody knows what Battleship Gray is, okay, thank you. It's like old VB6, Windows UI, Battleship Gray, baby, And I'm like, that's what it gave me. And I'm like very vanilla. So I'm like, make this, jazz it up. I felt like, one of those executives who are so out of touch, the best feedback, they're like, this needs more. You know what I mean? Have you ever had somebody tell you, it just needs more? Well, what the hell do you want me to do, man? I didn't even have to tell it what to do. It just did it. And it looked amazing. And literally, I felt like that guy, just like, make it pretty. I don't care. And it did. And that's what it freaking looked like, Yeah, that's crazy, right? Like I had to tell about the bubbles, but like it dressed this up. It put the player icons, it put all the courts so we can see all the players on every active court. And then it created, I wish you could see that, but it got cut off. But like literally, it created this neat little scoreboard thing for all the matches that were played. And it shows like the winners and the losers, or the winners and the non-winners. Sorry, it's 2025, right? And like the losers have their little faces there. And the score is like, 14-12, or, 11 to 9 or whatever, right? And I'm like, damn, that looks good, thank you. And so what did I accomplish after all this, right? I had not built a web app in probably 15 years, okay? I built a lot of systems in my day, but like it's been a while since I built a web app. And I built a web app and a web API in probably a few hours. No joke, okay? And I had to install like a line counter. This thing produced 46,000 lines of C# code for me. Nuts. This thing produced together, we produced 59 REST API operations, right? Some with very complex business logic built in. This isn't just basic CRUD, okay? I got 12 services, courts, facilities, events, players, all that stuff, right? 13 data access components, 42 unit tests. I haven't even scratched this. I haven't even really try-harded on the unit tests. But I ran the coverage and I got 40% unit test coverage. And like, I just had to iterate to be like, and you saw some of those prompts where I'm like, these are not assert equals true unit tests, right? It's like, check the state after this is run. Make sure we have 4 players. Like, I don't want to, have 3 players. What happens when there's 1 player? So like, this is good stuff. So that was my experience. So lessons learned, we're kind of getting to wrap up time. But vibe coding, it's a thing. And it is not the same as AI assisted coding. I did both. The AI assisted coding I did was squarely within my competency. Like, I am an advanced C# developer, okay? I can build you a backend, and it'll be beautiful. I can write unit tests, I can write integration tests, I can build you REST APIs, and they'll be amazing, right? But like, that's my competency zone, right? That's where I'm coding with AI, right? Vibe coding is where I am squarely outside of my competency zone. Web clients. I can't build HTML and JavaScript. I can barely remember how to do JavaScript, right? Like jQuery was just becoming a thing when I stopped doing web apps. All right, Drake's laughing at me. Okay, like jQuery, that's nasty. I don't want to touch that ever again. So vibe coding is a thing, but it's not all of the thing. Just because you're using AI doesn't mean you're vibe coding, okay? If you know something and you know something really well, AI can just be an accelerant to that. It's pouring gas on the fire. The next thing I learned with Aspire is that there is infrastructure as code and there is infrastructure from code. In my little app host, I would just tell Aspire in C#, what components I needed in Azure and what services I needed in my application, and it would go provision it, and it would connect the dots, and it would like light that stuff up. So I didn't have to go like do the connect the dots myself, like between 2 different tools. Aspire did the connect the dots, and I did the connect the dots in Aspire. But with traditional infrastructure as code, like we're provisioning something with Terraform or Bicep or whatever, right? Or ClickOps, right? And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to deploy my app to that thing. But I have to go figure out what all the connection strings are, all the endpoint names, all that stuff. And then I have to populate the configuration for my application to meet that contract between the infrastructure and the application, right? But Aspire, made that, all from code. The code just figured it out, but it only works in a very constrained way. Now you talk to David Fowler, he'll tell you there's no constraints, there's no limits, and maybe he's right, but like it seemed very constraining to me as somebody who's used to the Azure RM provider, or Bicep, like I can go provision anything there is on Azure. I can configure it any way that I want, and I can pipe things around, but I am playing a game of connect the dots at the end of the game, at the end of the day. But I have no limits on what I can do and what my applications can use. Whereas Aspire, David Fowler or somebody like him has to go like build that into Aspire to light it up. And then when they go build it into Aspire, it's going to have its own specific way that it lights that thing up. And I have some ability to customize that, but not as much as I do with a full, infrastructure lifecycle management, like with Terraform or Bicep, right? So that was an interesting like pro and con, right? There's always like trade-offs in every architectural decision. So like the .NET Aspire side, infrastructure from code, more constraints, less control, but faster. Like literally, like I had a fully production environment. Like you can go hit the Azure container instance today, right? And run, you know, through the app. But versus more flexibility, more control, but I'm playing connect the dots myself, right? Lastly, they took your jobs. Who said that? Exactly. What's up, man? So that's the old, you know, trope, right? Is like, oh my gosh, they're taking our jobs. AI is going to take our job. What are we going to do, right? And what are we going to do? Cry, pick up a new hobby, change careers, move into a van down by the river. Who's old enough for that one? You are. Thank you. Gosh, these youngins. Chris Farley, baby. No, man, like I think AI is actually a way for developers to accelerate our own journeys. Both in AI, like the things that you already do good, right? You're going to be able to do faster. And it'll be like a multiplier on top of like what your productive hours are. And then there's also things that you don't do good that you're going to be able to learn and be skilled up at. But the other aspect that I discovered, right, through this whole process was things that were previously infeasible. I think it misspelled that. I was going to say unfeasible. Things that were previously infeasible. Thank you, AI. Right, there is a purpose for humans. Like we can spell infeasible, like generating like not 100% unit test coverage or 100% integration test coverage, or seed data generators and load simulators. Right, these things were often nice to haves back in my day. Right, but now it's like if we're so productive using AI to do the meat and potatoes. Now we can actually do the stuff that we wished we could always do before, but we didn't have the budget or time to do it, right? So is there stuff that like AI is going to take off your plate? Yeah. Does that mean you won't have a job? Not until they do AGI, right? And then we'll all be playing pickleball. The end. I don't know how I am on time. 52 minutes.
Yeah.
Not bad.
8 to 10 minutes for questions.
Okay, there we go. What's up, Drake?
It's not related to the core of your presentation, but why did you decide to do integration test actually hitting the Azure table instead of using like in-memory database or some other kind of mock?
So Azure Table Storage has a simulator, and so it does a pretty good job of like running locally. And you actually get the features and functionality, and you're actually touching the APIs. And you don't have to create a mock or like but like that is something that could be done. Is like if you have a service or a database that doesn't mock that doesn't have a simulator and emulator like Azure Table Storage or Cosmos DB or SignalR or whatever, right? You like. That would probably be one of the things on my list, like, hey, create a sophisticated mock for this database, right? That activity would fall squarely on the infeasible. We're not going to ever do that list, right? But it's like, wow, if we just give it a few parameters and point it in the right direction, it'll go nuts. But Azure Storage has a reliable simulator that runs locally, runs in a container. So I was like, I'd just rather do that than go through the hassle of trying to mock it. Yeah. But in unit tests, like that's why I created those interfaces for the repositories, because then within the service logic code, I can just inject mock repositories that are just like storing into memory rather than storing into like actual table storage. Yeah.
So when you're running those integration tests, is that using Aspire to like set up Azurite?
So I run Azurite locally. Now Aspire does have the capability. I didn't, because my dev environment's a little wacky. I rock an M1 MacBook, and I'm running Windows in a VM, and Docker don't like that. So, but Aspire, this is a part of Aspire that I didn't really, I love the question, because this is like, I'm on the Aspire or the .NET Discord, and I'm chatting up all the Aspire guys like, why is this not working for me? And it's mainly because like Aspire is set up for running all this stuff in containers. SignalR, Azure Table Storage, like it'll spin up containers, running that thing locally, and it'll be just magic, right? So that's part of the magic of Aspire that I didn't personally get to experience just because of the constraints of my dev environment, because this was more about like the journey of like building this app using Aspire. So it's like I'm trying to see what the dev experience is like, not necessarily like, I don't know. I don't want to go build a whole new dev box just to, because then that'll delay the other, like, okay, like spin up a VM on my Proxmox at home or something. But, question?
So I'm interested on your thoughts on, you're a dev lead, you've got a team of 6, 8, 10 devs.
Yeah.
They're out vibe coding, and then it comes time for code review, and they can't explain to you what they actually accomplished or what's in the code. What about that side of the vibe coding?
Well, so if they can't explain what they did, that's a problem, right? But what I would envision, like if I'm a dev lead, right, and I have individual developers, each of those individual developers is essentially going to become a dev lead, right? And I think this is where I think as an industry, as a discipline, we're going to have to figure out how to train people up, because the only reason why I was able to be successful, and in my opinion, is because I wasn't vibe coding 90% of the time. I was vibe coding like 10% of the time on crap that I obviously don't know anything about, like Razor pages and HTML and JavaScript, right? But like like you have to have core competency, and I think that was on one of my slides. I don't know. Like you still need. Where is it? Yeah, I don't know.
You develop with AI versus vibe coding one.
Yeah, but like you still need to have core competencies, that you need to develop. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, on the left here. So you have to have a solid foundation of software principles of software architecture and design. So I think all those little dev leads that are like, maybe we're training them to go be widget makers, and we need to be training architects that really understand how things connect to each other in that big way, rather than like, I'm a widget maker, right? Because we're not going to be making widgets. That team, that vaporware team of 6 to 8 developers that I had working for me on this project, they were the widget makers, but I had to have that vision of what the end-to-end architecture looks like. I think that's fun. It's a great question. I actually I have not been thinking about that, but like, I think that's where we as an industry are gonna have to change how we grow people to become that architecture systems thinking. Otherwise, like you said, you take a widget maker and you say like, congratulations, you have 6 widget makers now working for you. Like, go have them make widgets. It's gonna be like garbage in, garbage out, right? So you have to have that solid foundation of software architecture and design, so that you can stitch it all together. And for me, it was a very natural thing to have a team of junior developers working for me, because like I've managed teams for 15, 20 years, right? And so I'm very comfortable in that space. And so having these interactions, I literally treated that like as a conversation, like I was having with a junior, on my team, like, oh, like, let's go oh, that's interesting. Sometimes it would give me like ideas, and I'm like, I like that. Bogus, like brought up, I never heard of bogus before. And as an architect or as a tech lead, people like, it's not like like you're not like a dictator, right? Like you don't know everything. People bring you ideas and you're like, that's a great idea. I didn't know that thing existed. Thank you. Let's go use that, or let's evaluate it and like evaluate the trade-offs, make a decision, right? Boom. right? So I think that was a natural place for me to be, but I think how do we get people to that level of like experience so that they can start doing that with their 6 to 8, widget makers? That's a big,
They had to go through the experience of being that junior developer who had a senior that taught them before they could get to that.
I know, right? Yeah. So it's like, how do we like train up now, like when you're not making the widgets? Yeah. I think there will need to be some sort of like, and this doesn't scale well, but like almost like master apprentice, kind of like Jedi, like Padawan kind of thing where like we up level people's thinking because they're not going to get hands-on experience in a real world production system just if they're focused on widget making anymore. At least that's what like from my experience, like, yeah, the productivity is insane. So what my recommendation, right, is to become a triple threat, right? You need to understand the software development. You need to understand cloud because that gives you that system-wide thinking. You can't just be an app dev like I'm making widgets, leave me alone. You need to understand I'm talking to table storage. I'm talking to Cosmos. I need an event bus, right? You need to understand how all that stuff works because you have to have that architecture kind of mindset. And understanding the automation, again, this will help you with vibe coding. Like, when you're at that boundary, I think automation, when you work with automation systems like using Open API Generator, that's a tool. That's an automation tool, right? I talk a lot about Terraform. That's an automation tool. But they're both automation tools. If you get familiar with using automation tools, you exercise a muscle where you're stitching things together, right? I use this tool for that. I use this tool for that. I use this tool for that. This tool does this. This tool does that, so on and so forth. How do you stitch them together? It's that same muscle that an architect uses, with that system-wide thinking to be able to connect the dots to create an end-to-end, system. So that's why I emphasize automation down here because, again, it's exercising that same muscle that I think is necessary for, the principles of software architecture and design, which is, again, architecture type thought patterns. So great questions, man.
Thank you so much.
Any other?
You're at time.
I'm out.
I had other
Okay.
questions.
Thanks, everybody.
So, got like a 7-minute break. There's more pizza. There's more water. We're gonna get the next laptop set up and then start again at 2. What's up, sunshine?
How you doing?
Question
Sorry, I thought you were going for a
Is
Fist bump, whatever. It's all cool. You talked about Aspire being a very opinionated framework.